Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is CM Alexander with the news. Last night's massive storm left a substantial amount of property damage in its wake this morning. With lines down all over town, we advise caution if you must leave your home. Today's forecast calls for sunshine, but it now appears an unexpected front of mist is coming in from the north. But I'm sure that'll blow over in no time. You're listening to Derry Public Radio. This is Derry Public Radio. Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King Book Club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, CM Alexander, alongside Joshua Kahn.
Hey, everybody.
And Benjamin Graham.
What's up, constant readers?
And today we are back with another Patreon selection by Jared Hazelwood. We are covering The Mist through Chapter 6 if you are following along, and if not, major spoilers ahead, and Josh is leading our discussion.
So hyped to finally be covering The Mist. This is a story that when we started the podcast, it was on my short list of things I wanted to do.
Yes.
But we've all read it, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Where does this book hold up for you guys in memory of from last time you read it? Like a pretty high place?
As good as I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember having any strong opinion one way or the other about this.
Interesting.
And so far, I'm holding to that.
All right. Now I'm even more excited to see if your opinion changes from the conversation. This has just been one of my favorites, so I'm really happy to have an excuse to reread it.
It's got a cool sci-fi edge to it that I think is why I like it so much.
It's also because it's a novella, it's streamlined, you know?
Yeah.
Once it picks up pace, it just goes. So let's jump into the Drayton family, because we get to spend chapter 1, the coming storm, meeting the family, they will all be our main protagonists, right? The whole thing, right?
Yep.
Oh, Josh.
We meet David, Steph, and Billy, who are standing out back in their house that's on a lake, and they are watching just a fog roll in. Nothing major, right?
Well, the fog is not.
Oh, well, yeah, the fog doesn't come right away.
We're watching a storm roll in.
From the north, and the brutal, they talk about the brutal heat and this breaking storm, and he knows it's going to be a massively terrible one.
There's so much foreshadowing in the first couple pages of this book with the storm and certain things that he comments on about his son and his wife that initially could just be chalked up to, this guy's a little dramatic, but okay, maybe he's just at that age and he has a kid where he's reflecting on how short and fragile life is, which obviously isn't the case. But this storm description of what ultimately happens, the whole time I was reading it, more so than when I read it the first time because I hadn't had this experience, I couldn't help but remember the land hurricane that we all experienced.
Yes.
Was that 2020?
It happened a few times, right?
Well,
no, just the once.
The big
the Direcco.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the once.
No, we've had 2 of them in the past 5 years,
the
right?
one that destroyed our lives for a week because everybody lost power. The tree in front of our house broke. I literally watched it fall down. So as all of this was happening, I was like, yes, this is a terrifying, upsetting, scary experience.
Yeah, he talks about the way big destructive weather comes in. He says it moves with this slow power where you can just feel it coming on. It really sets up this case of this sense of dread.
Yes, and I love how it plays off what you just said, that natural feeling we all have. We and animals respond even before we necessarily see or hear anything. It's like a chain, the barometric pressure, I'm sure. But you have all of these physical sensations that are not so overt that you realize what they are. And it seems kind of mystical, and I love it.
I have to admit that I am, in a very real way, terrified of most natural disasters.
Really?
Yeah. My entire life, tornadoes. I think I've probably had more nightmares about tornadoes than anything else in my life.
I have the most upsetting and wickedly awesome tornado nightmares.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
constantly.
It's weird. I'm fascinated by it, though. I have like this weird relationship where I'm like, I could watch tornado shit all day and get
No,
scared.
not me. No. And living in the Midwest, it's
Yes.
the fucking worst.
Mhm.
But no, I hear sirens and I'm like, I need to be in a basement right now. It's a very real fear of mine.
I think this is our first DPR how's the weather small talk.
For a Midwest podcast, it's surprising we haven't gotten there sooner. There's one moment that I felt I could relate to. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but it's when they're inside and the storm is picking up. It's before they've gone down into the basement, and he sees Steph and Billy standing in front of this picture window they have, and he has this image of the glass blowing in and tearing them to shreds. I 100% have had that reaction when I see people.
Yes. I have that in unreasonable circumstances anyway, just because I think the anxious brain does that to you.
Yeah, I was gonna say he frames it as this like this very dad feeling that you wouldn't understand this if you're a father. I'm like, you don't have anxiety, do you, Stephen King?
Anytime you guys don't answer right away, you're dead to me.
Yeah.
I just assume.
That makes sense. I mean, it's not all the time, because I mean, like I have talked about many a times, like I'm a Midwestern country boy. Like I am of the people who, when the massive storms hit, would be on the front porch
Watching the tornado touchdown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
Fuck
that's
that.
that was like what we did. And then we would go in.
Yes.
I've spent so much time in weird cellars.
Yep.
I can't tell you. But something is different about a storm in the country, standing out watching a storm. But for some reason, ever since like moving into town,
Wow.
yeah, I said it, whatever. Storms make me so much more anxious, and I don't know if it's because it's
seems
more
out of place.
claustrophobic. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. Storms feel more artificial when I'm not surrounded by nature.
I get that. Because
Yeah, I can't think of a better way to describe that
I
feeling.
didn't live in the country, but I had relatives who did. So we would stand on the back porch and watch the terror come until
Yeah.
our parents were like, get inside and in the basement. And you have these things that you collect that you put in the basement. Like, here's this blanket I like. Here's my little radio. Here's a candle.
The hand crank radio or the battery powered radio is always in the basement.
The hand crank?
Yeah.
How old are you?
It's to generate its own electricity. It's not like an old invention, CM.
In my head, I'm just picturing you like.
Are you imagining instead of a radio, me starting a Model T?
Yeah.
No, yeah, here's my radio. It's butter churn. I have to churn the music out.
Turn the music to butter.
Yeah,
We're just churning these tunes in the storm.
this is nothing.
How did we get here?
I have no idea. Storms. So luckily, they do head for the basement because sure enough, a full-on tree comes down and this giant limb takes out part of their roof and the entire picture window when they come up to see the damage the next day.
I don't know if this is a thing because they go down to the basement, the storm kind of backs off and they come back up, and then it comes again and they go back down and they hear some damage, and then it comes back like a third time and that's when the tree comes through the house. And I didn't know if it started yet, if that was part of it, or if it was just the mist the next day.
See, I wonder if that almost like aftershocks of this tear in reality.
Yeah, maybe
Well,
that's it.
I didn't take the storm as being a part of. I mean, we're not really given any clues one way or the other.
Yeah, true.
But my headcanon is the storm isn't part of what happens next. My headcanon is this storm is so bad, it's just such a freak of nature storm. He says that it's like not once a century bad, but pretty bad. And it just caused some sort of malfunction at whether it exists or not is questionable, but Project Arrowhead, that is what causes the mist to come.
That is interesting. That's
Like I
not
said, we
not
are
a bad
not
idea.
given any hints that this is actually what happens. Project Arrowhead is simply kind of mentioned in passing,
Yeah.
which is strange because in my head, Project Arrowhead is such a huge part of the
Yes.
story. Should we get into what Project Arrowhead is, or that happens?
It happens a bit later, but we can talk about it right now. Just what we know about it.
Yeah, it's basically just town gossip because takes place in kind of rural-ish Maine, of course. And our family that we're following are town folk. They've been there for years. His father was inexplicably a famous painter that's mentioned once and then never mentioned again. But they've been in town, and then there are the tourist people who are kind of outsiders. Very standard, like King, small Maine town.
Yeah, from here and from away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just love all the different rumors. Everybody has their
Yes.
own take on what this place is.
It's so great because he starts talking about there was this old drunk guy
yeah,
who would talk about
the molecules.
the different molecules, which reminded me so much of the electricity from Revival.
Oh, I thought about Tommy knockers for some reason.
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
But he'd tell about how there's this government base just on the outskirts of town, which is true. Like you can go there and you see the fences, the fenced off area. But everyone says it's different stuff. It's there's a lady who just thinks it's
One of them is tomatoes.
Yeah,
It's
just genetically
agricultural,
engineering crops, and people say it's like a weather station or whatever. But this old man says they're doing experiments on particles.
Yeah.
The demon particles.
They're shooting atoms into the air.
Yeah,
and that's
sure.
what Billy's like, they're already atoms in the air.
And that's really all we know
Yeah.
is this guy kind of thinks about it in passing.
But everybody who has their theory, quote, knows it because they know somebody.
for a reason they can't really go into.
Yeah, I know somebody who was around there and they said they saw this. So
It's all
it is
hearsay. Yeah.
all that constantly.
So I'm interested to see if we get more of Project Arrowhead in the book, or if I'm maybe thinking of the movie, or maybe just I've built up this theory in my head out of nothing. I don't know.
Entirely could be. We'll find out. So let's jump to the next morning after they have survived the storm.
Before we do, can we talk about, it's my favorite part.
Dream sequence?
Dream sequence.
Yeah. What did you guys make of that dream sequence?
It's so fucking cool.
Would you like to describe it?
It's a simple dream. He is looking out at the lake, at the city across the lake from them. And the city is being beset on by a god. A figure so large that its waist is obscured by a cloudless sky. That's the wildest phrase.
That's horrifying.
I
love it.
Here, this is Ben's fear confessions. The idea of anything that big is bad. I do not like it. It's the same reason I can't go out in like the ocean, because something that big could be down there. I don't know.
Something that
That's
big is
true.
down there.
Don't do this to me.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to freak you out. I truly believe that.
I really thought you were gonna back that up with an actual fact.
Same.
I thought you were gonna be like, yeah, no, the colossal squid is actually that.
I mean, we've all heard that, but
We've spent 4 years with CM. That's on us to believe she had facts to back it up.
hey, I heard somebody talking about a thing they saw in the ocean. I know it's true.
Good enough for
I
me.
hate it.
But yeah, that it's and the god is moving towards him, and it just smoke is
Yeah.
coming like from where he was. It's super fucking creepy. I love it. It's so ominous. So the next morning, we're assessing the damage. Everybody, like the power lines are down. There's some very cute family stuff. There's a lot of really good family building. What did you think about the kind of family in a light crisis?
I don't know. What's his name? David? Dave?
Yeah, Dave. Or David, yeah.
Kind of giving me Jack Torrance.
Really?
Interesting.
Why?
Maybe it's just the fact that this was obviously written in like the 70s. Him giving Billy sips of beer in the backyard.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, my dad let me sip his beer.
Okay, that maybe I'm being unfair, but I don't know. It's between that and like how quickly he kind of loses his temper later on. I was like, this guy's not the best dude.
Oh, okay, because I got hung up a little bit on him losing his temper, which we'll get to. I'm not gonna like really dive into this right now, but I understood it more when I reread it again. And he was talking about, he didn't mention it about himself, but he was commenting on like 3 or 4 other people's very different from one another behavior and how it was their way of coping. And I think he just was like not able to control his emotions after everything that happened in the back room.
That's understandable.
Not trying to negate what you're saying, but
No,
I just didn't get those vibes.
I get it. And it's just, there's a few things, just a few of the ways he acts and like how critical he is of specifically his asshole neighbor, who is an asshole.
He is an asshole.
But I don't know. It just kind of gave me like this guy's not a bad dude, but he's not like a nice guy.
Oh.
You could see him calling somebody an officious prick.
Yeah.
You guys, he's Tom Jane to me.
Oh,
I can't
yeah.
not. So that's
I see.
Fair.
that. I think I am a little biased.
So the movie is going to hang over this episode
Yes,
so
sorry.
much.
I'm not going to mention it again.
Oh, no, it's completely understandable. The movie is a goddamn masterpiece.
It's so rock solid.
Not to get ahead of us.
Yeah.
5 out of 5
Blue
Bush
Chamber.
Chamber.
Yeah,
For that
yeah.
movie.
There is a piece of character information dropped in this section as he's talking about the back and forth list stuff with his wife, and he's thinking about other people in town. This is the first mention of Mrs. Carmody.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line here that is so important for later on, and I'd never caught it until this read. Because he's describing that Mrs. Carmody basically runs the needful things that's in town. And he mentions that Mrs. Carmody has gotten into Steph's head with her saying like the black summer or whatever that legend was of like
With her
this weather.
doomsday kind of
Yeah, her
weird
doomsday
witchy
stuff.
stuff.
The lake freezes over and it stays cold enough that the ice on the lake turns black.
Yes. So the quote here is, she exercised a rather unpleasant hold over Steph's mind, which was typically practical and hard-headed. Something we are going to, that's some hard foreshadowing for Mrs. Carmody.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I never caught that piece of character building because I know that becomes a thing for people is like, why does anybody listen to anybody like that?
Yeah.
We dropped that she has a gift for it.
There's like foreshadowing just all over this first part. It's amazing and I love it. I really we didn't really answer your question, Josh. I love the family stuff, especially because we know through this part that we're covering that we don't see Steph again.
Mhm.
And we get enough of their relationship and enough of her that upsets me.
Yes.
And you like them. You just like all of them. And I loved when Billy, he said something to Billy, I think it was in relation to the note to the radio station. And Billy's like, oh, that's horse shit, right? He's like, my son doesn't really have a sense of humor.
Yeah,
Was he 5?
he's 5 years old, and Billy is in King's sweet spot of writing kids. This is one of the good ones.
Yeah, it is. While they're hearing people try to clean up around their houses, next door he hears his neighbor trying desperately to start his chainsaw.
This is a great scene because he doesn't sneak up, but he carefully makes his way as if he's going and, just around his own property and sees him with his very expensive chainsaw, just calling it a cunt, just everything. He's so angry. And I loved because we do get this neighbor is a jerk. They had a property dispute and David won. He had to take him to court. And then he's like, well, you only won because you're a town person and I'm an out-of-towner. And I love when King writes about town people versus out-of-town people. So he goes back then to his house with a smile on his face. Yeah. Oh, and we find out, this made me sad, in some of the family building piece, we come to understand that his dad, when he was still almost a kid, built the boathouse that the neighbor's tree that he should have cut down because it was dead ends up crushing.
Yeah, there's no love lost between these
Mm-mm.
neighbors. But David tries to take the high road. When he notices that Brent's been standing behind him for a good long time while he's been running his chainsaw just fine. And he stops and he has that conversation with him. And Brent basically says, you know, can I borrow your car, head into town? A tree fell on my T-Bird.
His 1960 like mint condition.
Mint condition T-Bird. And I love that this is the first time where he's like, I legitimately felt bad for him in that moment.
I feel like this softened him. I feel like if not for the car,
they
it
do
wouldn't
a
have happened.
great job introducing this character because you are told he's an asshole, but he is introduced in such a sympathetic way that you're like, oh, maybe these guys can hash it out.
Yeah.
Like you get this feeling of like, okay, Dave doesn't like him, but he doesn't seem like an outwardly bad dude.
Yeah, they just had a bad experience together.
So when it kind of ramps up in a little bit, you're like, this guy is kind of a dick.
You mean when he fucks David's wife?
Well, yeah, that's not great.
Yeah, that part, it is great because you're like you said, he's very sympathetic in this introduction, and yeah, David says, we're running into town, you can ride with us. And they go inside and they have a beer, and yeah, he's just staring at the front of Steph's shirt. And he's like, that's the moment I knew we'd never be friends.
Okay, can I talk about something here?
Sure.
Because he does this. He does it twice. And when David and Billy and Brent are leaving then to go to the store, David's kind of started to have these like weird feelings that he can't really, like feelings of dread that he can't identify. And he just has this overwhelming feeling that he wants Steph to come with them. And she's like, no, I got to do some gardening, and looks at her husband and then looks at Brent and looks back, like kind of that marriage communication. Like, I don't want to be in the same vehicle with this guy anymore. And he gets it, but he tries again just because he has that bad feeling. And I couldn't help but think, you know, later when he's leaving, he's like, and I will never see my wife again. It turns out, which is horrible, King.
Yeah.
I thought, oh shit, if this like, I don't want to say it's Brent's fault because that's just wildly like overacting and mean. But if he hadn't done that, she might have gone with and she wouldn't have presumably died.
Yeah. I feel like she probably still would have stayed. There was so much damage around there. She might have. But who knows?
Can I real quick talk about this like feeling that he has?
Yeah.
Because he, like you said.
We didn't talk about seeing the mist on the lake.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because they are out in the yard and looking over everything. There was a downed power line.
Yeah, a bunch of
that we didn't mention.
That description of that was disturbing.
Kind of made me think of tentacles writhing around.
Yes.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Anyway, but they've looked out on the lake, and coming from that town where he had the dream, he sees this wall of mist that he thinks might be moving toward them.
It's not moving away with the direction of the breeze.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy.
So he has this kind of unease, and it kind of escalates pretty quickly to like he's afraid for no reason. I didn't think it worked. It was just there didn't feel like enough reason. Usually, I mean, there's lots of premonitions in King, but it was just like, I'm scared and you need to be scared with me just because I tell you to.
I felt it. It worked for me because I was thinking about how before I knew the story, before I had read it through the first time several years ago, it wasn't so powerful or I feel like strongly described or worded that you could kind of like read over it and not necessarily pick up on it. Like the foreshadowing with his son and with Stephanie. It seemed subtle in a way. And I think going back to our conversation about being afraid by natural disasters, there sometimes is something very unnerving and almost supernatural in those for me sometimes. So that like connected with my brain. Oh, maybe I'm just weird.
I think I think it's effective in the way it builds on. He notices, first off, he can't see the town anymore. Then there's the fact that they can't get a radio signal from any station north of that mist. And the third thing, that that it's like a ruler straight line that it's coming out in. That's how it looks. And then of course the going against the wind, all of these things are just creepy enough that it freaks me out.
I also like when he gaslights his wife. She's also freaked out by it. And he's like, oh, it's blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, are you sure? He's like, no, if I was sure, I'd be a weatherman. He doesn't say it like snotty, but it's like, yeah, at least he's honest.
All right, let's get to the Federal Food Supermarket. This moment right here, when they get to the store and they're walking in and David goes to call home and then Billy grabs Brent's hand to walk across the street. That moment is what made me think it was going to be two adversaries become unlikely partners.
Yeah,
I
same.
thought that's what it was setting the tone for, and I so sadly wrong.
That's so cool, though, because it does make you grieve that what could have been later more.
So they go into, after watching an old couple walk straight into the fucking door.
I love
I forgot about that.
Okay, and this is what I'm talking about with our land hurricane. We didn't have power for 7 days. And when King's writing about all of these, just the way they're looking for, they don't feel the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Later, he looks up to see if the lights went out because it got inexplicably darker. And he's like, the lights hadn't been on the whole time I've been in here. And it's all those little things when you walk into the house and your power's been out for 3 days and you still flip the switch.
Yeah.
Or you notice the house has the feeling of silence that does not exist, even when, your TV and radio and everything is all off. There's still all of these sounds
The
of
hum.
electricity that you never noticed before.
Yeah, I'm not going to get the exact phrase right, but he talks about the general unease that happens in America when the power is out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel that so hard. Anytime the power is out, I wish I was fucking dead. It's the worst. I would not survive any apocalypse. I'm out. There's no refrigeration. Nah,
Game over, man.
I'm done.
It's like all of these little injustices that aren't many of them aren't a really big deal. It's like trying to staple some papers and you do it and there's no staples in there and it's such a like unjustifiably upsetting moment.
It feels, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me
Our
in this moment.
first world
Even though-
problems.
Yeah, I feel it. How would you guys describe how they find the store when they walk in?
My worst nightmare. I can hardly deal with. I have to go into a grocery store no matter what time of day. I usually try to go at like 2 a.m. on a weekend when no one is there. I have to have sunglasses on and earbuds in. And I just, if anybody is within 5 feet of me, I am very upset. I hate grocery stores.
That's wild.
It's totally normal, Josh.
Oh no, I almost always go in with at the very least headphones. I have to be
Interesting.
I have to be blasting like some fucking really angry metal to get me pumped up enough to be in a grocery
to
store.
deal with all the people who meander as widely as they can in front of you, like they're the only people in the grocery store.
Unfortunately, opposite. That's me. I'm that person. I am putting on music to deal with the discomfort of being the possibility of being viewed in public. That's my deal.
Weird shock, Ben. I'm the opposite. I don't wear headphones or anything because
you don't.
there's
You're
always
like,
a
"Hey,
chance.
everybody,
There's
I'm
always
here."
a chance I'm going to run into somebody I know.
That's what I just said.
The worst possible outcome of going to the
Yes,
grocery store.
seeing people you know.
Here's the thing:
If
they get to
you
see me.
ever see me at a grocery store, we've never met. Okay?
Yeah, don't talk to me either.
Don't gaslight me in a Hy-Vee.
Okay, so this grocery store, as I said, our worst nightmare, me and Ben, the way the line is described, I got lost in reading because it seemed so much larger than any store I've ever been in.
That's the
could
thing.
Possibly be.
I couldn't get the size of the place down.
Me neither.
Because it's described, and just because it's the 70s, I guess I have a very specific image of what that means. And I guess in my head, that's small. I was like
Yeah.
picturing it as a small, like local
Like a
market.
mom and pop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Convenience.
But then
store.
later on, when there's 60 people in here.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Jesus, how crowded is it? And
I mean,
it doesn't
it's a
seem like
super-
it.
It's a
Supermarket.
chain,
Yeah.
so I figure it's probably a decent size. Probably like department store size-ish.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I would have just left my cart full of food and gone home.
So they see this chaos, people grabbing odds and ends. David and Norton go their separate ways. We see Bud and Ollie, the two people who run the supermarket. They're at the checkout line just trying desperately to keep it moving because
There's no
everybody's
electricity,
uncomfortable.
so
And
everybody, they have to hand calculate
Yeah.
everything and then make notes, and sucks.
yeah. Billy at this point sees that there are two army men and they've just been talking about Project Arrowhead.
Are they hot?
They might be.
We don't know because they're men. So King doesn't think it's important to talk about.
Sorry, he didn't describe their balls swinging as they walk through the parking lot. Also, it's Billy who sees them, so I don't know if I want that interpretation from his perspective.
I feel like it never matters who's seeing a woman in a book.
Oh, and it's every woman.
Yeah.
It's either, oh, wow, she's really pretty. She won't be mentioned again. Or, wow, she's kind of fat and she won't be mentioned again.
If anyone listening, if you ever wonder why our heads are so fucked up, why we're so focused on how we look all the time and shit like this.
Yes, it sucks.
I bet they're hot though. It's just what I wanna
Probably, yeah.
say.
As everybody's in the store, they're at this point they're in line and nobody wants to move from the line and risk losing their spot, but they start hearing sirens. There's police sirens, but there's also the siren, that the alarm siren in town, like the tornado siren going off. And they hear all this chaos. And then a man comes sprinting in the door, yelling that there's something in the fog.
And he's got a bloody nose.
Yeah. And people like rush to the windows to look out and see what's happening.
It happens so fast.
Yeah.
It rules.
It is really cool. And is this when a few people actually leave? Because this might be my favorite part, when people, because they have to get out of line to really see, because they can see out, but they can't see a distance because the front of the store is just windows, like ceiling to floor. And the one guy, like Ollie is cool. We know that right away. But the other guy, Mr. Bud, is really upset that people are leaving with their groceries in their hand that they haven't paid for. And I get that. But he takes some lady's mushrooms and she goes, normally this might annoy me, but I loved it. It's the best part of the book. She goes, "Give me back my mushies." And it's described that the unexpected term of endearment caused two men nearby to laugh. And I imagined it as a tension-breaking moment.
Yeah.
It is extremely funny because of how fucking out of place it seems in this book. It is
Just indignant mushies.
Where's my mushies? It's so stupid. And yeah, you're right. The two guys, the fact that not a bunch of people, it's just like two dudes that were standing nearby.
That's what makes it funny.
That's
yeah.
really funny. It's good.
And then we very soon escalate to horror as the mist starts moving into the parking lot. They can only see 4 feet out the door, and it causes this massive panic, like CM mentioned. And there's nearly a stampede of people rushing out. And it talks about people rushing out, and they hear sounds, and then it just says, and they never saw those people again.
And David sees something that he doesn't think anyone else saw, which was one guy. It didn't seem like he ran into the mist. It seemed like he was at some point pulled into it. He couldn't see anything pull him, but just the way his body moved through it and his arms kind of went up, it was like something got a hold of him and pulled him in.
Because that's why he grabs Norton. Norton's ready to walk out and check it out too, and he manages to pull him back. And it's like just after he stops and that you start hearing the screams coming from the mist.
And I think it was before this too. Oh, because we didn't mention he tried to call Steph on the payphones, which also aren't working, because he just keeps having this feeling about her. Like he really wishes that she was with them. And before people start stampeding out, he thinks like maybe we should just leave now and go home, but then says, by then it was probably already too late.
Most likely. Norton fights him a little bit, and they hear one of the screams. I love the way it's described that they hear a shriek, and then it's cut off so suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's dead silence. And Norton starts saying, riling people up about we should go. And then there's just all we get is a thud. A thud so hard and heavy, it shakes the entire store and cracks the glass, gets a chunk of glass out of one of the windows. It hits so hard.
Can I mention here that I thought this was interesting? Later, when David tries to get Brent to help with something, I was like, why? Why him? Like, he's an out-of-towner. Why does David think people would listen? And then I realized, because he kind of naturally took that position right here when he was starting to try to gather people. And so in retrospect, it made sense. It's like, oh, okay, he sort of showed that he was willing to and could successfully take on that kind of leadership.
Well, he's a lawyer.
He's
right?
he's a very charismatic.
But it's just that out-of-town thing that But yeah.
It's something, for some reason, I rarely do this, like casting characters in my head as I read stuff.
You rarely do this? I feel like we talk about who you'd cast all the time.
Okay, so I rarely consciously do this. Yeah, you're totally right. Fucking called out.
I thought you were being cute, like you're doing a bit.
Anyway, I couldn't not picture, and this is just going to be for a very select few, I feel like, the guy that plays Chuck, Saul Goodman's brother in
I haven't seen Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. So the thud has happened. That is when the town siren stops also, and that's that first settling of now there's nothing outside. Now I want to talk about the woman and her request for help.
Mm-hmm.
There is this lady that at this point mentions that she is here and her 2 kids are at home.
She's hot.
Very important.
Very important that she's hot. Well, because if she's hot, someone should want to help her, is I think what King is trying to say.
That is the fucking subtext right. Of the story.
But she says she has 2 kids at home. I don't remember how old they are, but they're both very young. And she says, like, sometimes the older one forgets to watch the littler one and is begging people for help, and no one is answering her. And it says, I fucking hate this line, and it's in the movie, and it makes me so mad. It's won't anybody see a woman home?
Walk a lady home. I love it. Well,
I hate it so much.
This is set back
sure.
too, so I feel like it's more normal language that would be used.
But it's still so, like, after all of this, trying to appeal to chivalry, and nobody wants to die.
No, one guy tries, but his wife, who had been arguing with him earlier about where an earthquake was, like such a typical old married couple thing, he starts to step forward and his wife's like, mm-mm. And she asks a few other people, and she asks David, and this bothers me so much. He picks up Billy and says I picked Billy up and held him like a shield.
Hell yeah.
I mean, he's right. Like he shouldn't be the one to go out, but it is
tough.
Yeah. So she goes out all by herself, and nothing dramatic. They just watch as she silently disappears into the mist and makes it home safely, and her kids are okay, and everything is fine for this family.
Yep.
We're going to get to why that makes me super angry in a few episodes. The idea of that conceit makes me furious. Now we have another small time jump. Our next chapter, I love the chapter titles in The Mist.
Some of them are so long.
They're so long, and they're like
a summary
bullet point idea. Yeah. Like this one is called The Storage Area, Problems with the Generator, What Happened to the Bag Boy.
That is that chapter.
That's the whole chapter. Yeah. So next chapter, so we come into this chapter with Billy having a well-deserved full-on breakdown. Mm-hmm. Like this poor kid, he just wants his mom. He has no way to understand what's happening.
And he's asking if she's all right. Mm-hmm. And David believes he's lying to him when he says she is. And he's trying to comfort him and just doing a terrible job.
Mm-hmm. It's
terrible.
One of the most stressful aspects of this story for me is just thinking of any child living through this disaster.
Yeah.
It is very upsetting. It is too easy for me to put myself in that headspace of having no idea what's going on and being terrified of things that even the adults can't understand. It's the thought of David being there and having to comfort this kid when he himself is terrified of things beyond his control. It's very upsetting.
The way in this book that over the course of a handful of hours, we see Billy waste away, basically, is one of the most horrifying aspects of the story to me. It's like, it makes me think this is the line in The Shining when it makes a comment that that's the moment Danny Torrance would have gone insane if he hadn't spent the past several months scared out of his mind already. This is that, but for somebody who wasn't scared for a long time straight. Like, that's what Billy is. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah. So
Billy finally goes to sleep. David goes to look in the back for like a cargo blanket or something to wrap him up with. And that's when he steps into the back room and starts coughing because it's filling with exhaust, because the generator that is only keeping like the beer cooler on and some of the produce running, something's blocking the exhaust and it's all coming back. So David shuts it off and everything's fine.
Yep. End of story.
For a few seconds until several people barge back trying to figure out what the fuck happened back here.
Before that happens, though, he hears something that upsets him, like a slithering that he can't quite identify. It's not a sound that he's heard before, heard animals or people make.
It's another thing that I absolutely relate to. He hears this noise and says he immediately reverts to a 4-year-old scared of something in the dark.
He falls and hits his head. Like, he can't even get out. He has to calm himself, like, and focus.
I get that.
And there's barely the only light is coming through the crease in the door because now he's killed the power. That's when Ollie and some other people run back to see what's on the what happened to the generator. And he, to David's credit, tries to tell them, I heard something out there, and they're thinking he's crazy. And the thing that I love most about just this section is how real it is, because David is trying to say, turned it off, something's blocking it. They see a problem they can fix in the middle of a problem that's so far beyond their understanding.
And that's one of the instances that he acknowledges that this is how they're coping. He copes by getting angry.
But it's such a natural response, I feel like, that let's
they feel like they can
ignore-
handle something. They're not scared anymore.
Yeah.
It's better to feel useful than scared.
Yeah, so the plan becomes the bag boy is they're gonna turn the generator on, open the door, the loading door. He'll squeeze out, unclog the exhaust, come back in. Everything's fine.
What's his penis doing?
Low and to the left.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. You guys, listeners, it's I only make fun of it because it's funny to me. We didn't get a description of how hot the bad boy is.
Yeah, I gotcha. That's fair. Would either of you like to talk about what happens here when they fire up the generator?
Yeah, it all goes fucking dicks up.
Yep.
Like real fast. They turn on the generator and the bag boy opens the door and is very quickly greeted by tentacles. Very large tentacles. I believe they mention a tentacle that is 5 feet wide.
5
Yes.
feet.
So follow that back in your imagination to whatever it's attached to.
No.
I had to reread it to be like, am I
Me too.
reading this wrong? Because that's too big.
That's insane.
It's too big. It's upsettingly big.
And it immediately grabs onto the bag boy. It has giant suckers that begin burrowing into his skin.
Yeah, it's
and
eating him.
It's eating him with the tentacles. And he is quickly overwhelmed. They're writhing over him, and he's holding on to the frame of this doorway somehow. I expected this kid to get ripped apart.
Yeah.
because of how many of these tentacles are around him. And David runs forward. He's the only one to try and stop this. And he grabs the kid and has to back off when a tentacle, he says he feels it brush against him. And he knows that if it would have touched him, if it would have got him, he would have been going out into the mist too.
This part is so upsetting because when that's happening, and he's like yelling at the other guys, like, close the door, help, and everyone is frozen. And he's watching more and more tentacles come in, and he realizes he is also surrounded by them because he has this kid like by the waist, and the lower half of him is being pulled away. And he thinks about Billy in the aisle alone, and that if something happens to him, maybe Brent would watch out for him, but Billy would be all alone. And he makes the decision to let go. And he sees before the kid gets sucked away into the mist, he sees into his eyes and knows that he is completely aware of what's happening to him.
That's when King does that. That's the thing that fucks me up the most, when King will just say, and it looked like their eyes were fully aware as something horrible is happening.
Which is even like, because this kid, before this was happening, was being openly hostile.
Yeah.
He was basically mocking David for being
He was kind of being a greaser.
He was being an 18-year-old
He was being
kid.
a total greaser. Because when they first
I know
make
you wouldn't go out, but I will.
That, when they're like first like, David says, I wouldn't open that door. And he just openly is like, yeah, I know you wouldn't, pussy. And then when this happens, like the idea of being like, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Oh no. Yeah.
Fortunately for me, if anything like this ever happens, I'm such a weenie that if anything was like tentacling or consuming me, I would go into shock so quickly. I would not be aware. So don't worry, guys.
Oh, good.
It is, what is happening around them is also crazy, because Jim, one of the guys who was fighting David about this, is just saying, you should have said what you meant better over and over.
That makes me angry.
So infuriating.
Well, it makes David angry too because he beats the shit out of him.
Yeah, he does. Thankfully, Ollie pulls himself together, and Ollie's the person who turns on the generator, so David can grab a broom handle and close the door. It severs one of the tentacles that's still inside, and they are left standing in the darkness again with just some flashlights. And David beats the shit out of Jim. And what's the other guy's name? Myron? Yeah, he beats the shit out of both of them, and it's great.
Well, no, he doesn't beat up the other one.
No, the other
Verbally,
guy.
he does.
Yeah, Ollie stops him from attacking Myron also. So what did you think of this reaction? We've kind of talked around it a little bit.
Of David's anger?
Yeah.
I understood it only when we really articulated what he saw right before that, because no one else tried to help. He had tried to stop it. He watched this kid die. He watched the understanding and knowing that this kid knew what was happening to him. So I think he's in a really elevated place, and I can see why he would just start punching.
Yeah, it does make, in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense where in this moment, we kind of have to stop seeing David as the protagonist, in my opinion, because from here on out, it's kind of a
survival.
It's the whole story turns into this, the monsters are, what's the name of the episode? The monsters arrive on Maple Street or whatever it's called. It's the classic Twilight Zone episode where it's all a metaphor for the Cold War because it's a Twilight Zone episode where strange things start happening and all of the neighbors turn on each other and all of them become suspicious of each other. And it becomes this like everyone slowly kind of moving away from humanity in the name of survival.
I see.
For younger listeners, The Walking Dead.
Sure. Mine's better, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so I like it better as like David is on the brink of just losing it.
Yeah. I mean, Ollie's not wrong when he stops him from beating up the other guys. Like, it's not going to help anything, man.
They do decide before heading back out into the supermarket that they have to tell everybody. They have to let people know there really is something scary out there. They just have to figure out how to do it.
Oh, they're going to do it by getting really drunk.
Well, yeah. I mean,
again,
the two of them do.
understandable.
Ollie and David try real hard
Yeah.
to no avail.
Oh, I would just hope that somebody had really hard drugs. I would just start doing all the drugs.
This is also when we find out that it is 12:15 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not much time has passed. 25 minutes, he says.
Bananas that so much shit happens in this short span of time. So David has this idea. If we're going to have to tell everybody this news, we should get somebody who people will listen to, perhaps. And so he grabs
An
Norton.
out-of-towner.
But like you said,
Right.
he stepped up and got people's attention. So they need that on their side.
He's not going to do that here.
Oh, boy.
This is our other really clear instance of David recognizing Norton's way of coping is to just this isn't happening.
Denial.
Yeah, because they have evidence.
Yeah. Let's talk about their conversation with Norton. Really, you can boil it down to they tell him everything and Norton says, "Good one, you're playing a prank on me."
This is such a trigger for me.
Yeah.
The idea of willful ignorance
Yes,
drives
it's
me
upsetting.
insane.
Sure.
Because like CM just said, they have evidence. There is a severed tentacle in the other room.
They should have just brought it out. But he
should.
still would have,
Well, yeah.
I'm sure, found...
Especially because every time they touch it, it's still kind of alive.
Yeah, I guess I get why they don't want to
Yeah.
touch it.
But they say, okay, come into the other room, see it, listen to it, hear it for yourself. And he just outright says no. And there's no reason for him to say no other than, I kind of know you're going to be right, and I don't want to deal with it. And that drives me insane.
It drives David insane too, because again, here he resorts to just almost instant anger. It escalates. And this has kind of been more where I see where you're coming from. Mm-hmm. And Norton's like, go for it, man. Because he's basically, he's like, I'll kick your ass if you don't come back here with me. He's going to drag him back kicking and screaming. He's like, do it. Beat up a guy who's old enough to be your dad and has a heart condition. And one of the drunk assholes is like, yeah, fuck him. Fuck his heart condition. Beat him up. But he refuses and he starts flipping out. He starts screaming. And then Bud comes over and he's like, what's going on here? And he ends up being the one who David gets to go back into the room. And more of I think that was Ollie who's like, just do it and get this over with. And so Bud's like, okay, fine. And the second he goes back there, he's freaked out too. He grabs David.
Yeah. This moment is such a pivot point for the story, though, with the Norton and David back and forth. I wanted more than anything because so many moments, it happens more in TV, I feel, than it does in books, but you have those moments of man, why don't you just say what you mean to this other character and get something?
Yeah.
And David flat out says, quietly to Norton, I need you.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted him so desperately to
Respond
hear
to that,
it,
yeah.
Because you don't often get that level
He
of
just says,
vulnerability.
I need your help me. That's why I'm coming to you. Yeah, you're totally
And
right.
then, nope. All because he cannot face the idea of something he can't comprehend.
I do like when David and Bud come back out and Bud's like, all right, people, we have a serious problem. He says it cooler. I can't remember the exact words.
I love that. Yeah, Bud his whole thing is still protecting the store.
That's his coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Because he gives them a hard time about beer, and a few of them are like, we're past that point. Doesn't matter right now. So he's taking down names because he's gonna keep a tab of
course.
who owes
There's
what.
a little bit that it's just a throwaway line that freaks me out because David says he's keeping tabs. He's going to tell this the store, not thinking that the other stores in these other towns might not exist anymore. As far as they can tell, the eastern seaboard may not exist anymore. That's a thing. That's a thing that freaks me out in real life when I think about large scale disasters like this, is being in the moment of where you are and not knowing the extent of it.
Yes.
Very scary.
I love having now reading this again that I have read Annihilation, the Southern Reach trilogy, all three of those
Yes.
books.
Literally rereading it right now.
Yeah, so
It's
listeners,
fucking good.
if you want to know more about that, check out one of our Patreon episodes where we talk about it. It's another story like this where there's just this thing that blocks you from understanding what's going on past that point. It's amazing.
Yeah. And we should point out that before Bud went back there, that was Mrs. Carmody's first big speech that the mist is
Oh my
dead.
gosh, yeah, sorry. In my head, I had them all lumped together.
It's hard not to. Well, I mean, it is hard not to because the Mrs. Carmody stuff is very similar each time, and it's only dropped
Yeah.
here and there.
And she scares some hot teen girls.
Yes, definitely scares the hot
We
teen
need like a
girls.
stinger for that.
It's boner talk.
Oh,
and
yeah,
we need
boner talk. Yeah.
If anybody out there wants to write a sting for boner talk, please feel free. The next chapter covers the next 4 hours. I didn't realize how excited I was to have a time frame in this book.
Yeah.
I dig stories happening on a clock.
Mm-hmm.
Countdowns obviously are the best, but knowing that so much has already happened before noon, and then knowing that we are just about halfway and we're still only advancing 4 hours, just it makes me so happy
It is really
that
cool.
this is the worst day of anybody's existence ever, and we get to read about it and not experience it.
Jeez.
So at this point, Norton has become the leader of the Flat Earthers, a group of like 10 people who've just banded
Refuse to
together.
believe.
Yeah. What an interesting group that must be.
My only consolation with this group is that it keeps getting smaller.
I do really love that. Every time they bring it up, it's like it starts at 10 to 12. Now it's 8.
Yeah.
Now it's 5.
You guys ever think about how you would react in situations like this? Because this makes me think, like, would I be in real life? Like, we, the three of us, consume a lot of horror, a lot of fantasy, a lot of sci-fi. And so I like to think that in a situation that would stretch the imagination, something that we would consider in real life impossible, if it happened, I'd be like, okay, I'm adapting to new information. I just saw tentacles, so I gotta believe that that was real. But there is a part of me that's like, the idea of being like, nah, I can't accept this seems tempting.
Tempting, I think, is the right word.
Listeners, I'm rolling up my sleeves. I just want you to have this visual. I've taken first aid and crisis training. So I feel like that would kick in, tentacles or no. And I'd like to think that all of the crap I've had to do and like for school and for the job I do and all the crap I lived through, that I hope that I would be flexible and adapt. I think it depends on who you're with too. If you have like who you see as that strong person who you are drawn to and want to follow. So if that person you see is Norton, then maybe you do kind of fall into accepting that this isn't real and protecting yourself that way. If you see David as a stand-up person in the community and you believe in what he says, maybe you're a little more on that side of things. So I think there are a lot of things that play into that, but first aid training would have me set until I saw blood and then I'd be like, oh.
I'm a disaster nester. So if something terrible is happening, I will batten down the hatches wherever I am, and this is where I live and die until this is over. Fun fact, my old house, you guys were both there. I don't know if you ever noticed my barricade brackets by my front and back doors. I had 2x4s. I could literally barricade all my doors and windows in my old house.
Amazing.
That's fascinating.
My dream is to live in a fortress that I could with like.
I wish
with
you guys
like,
could see his face when he says this.
Like touch of a button. Remember the first Purge movie? I want that house. I want a house that at the touch of a button, metal shutters over my doors and windows.
Ben, Does Josh seem aroused right now?
It's a very weird energy. Oh, Christ. It's a very weird energy you're giving off. I'm not going to lie.
I don't even know what you said. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I threw you off.
No, that's how I do.
So I guess we're going to Josh's house, maybe.
That's how I respond to crises. I lock down, and I will weather the storm until the storm passes.
Yeah. Stay put.
Yeah. Now, this scene is one of my favorites. It is, Flat Earth Society be damned. Ollie challenges Norton to, if he is so sure nothing's wrong, go outside the front door, walk all the way around to the back, grab a can out of the recycling, bring it back as proof.
Also reasonable. Like, what a great idea.
Reasonable.
Ollie is the fucking MVP
Yes.
of this
He's our
whole situation.
protagonist. Yeah.
I like him so much more than David. Because when we first kind of are getting brief descriptions of a bunch of people in the store, Ollie is described as kind of this like chubby, like
unassuming,
ineffectual guy. Kind of a.
He's described as gay, like in the way that when writing this, you might, because he has a pinky ring and he's really nice and soft spoken.
Yeah, exactly.
I did not get that at all.
Oh,
David said
the line of
Yeah.
when I think of Ollie, I always kind of assumed he was afraid of girls. Big air quotes.
Yeah.
Like it is at least heavily implied. And even if it wasn't heavily implied, that's how I saw him. And once shit starts going down, he is from the get-go just calm, and he gets stuff done in the garage. He's the guy that goes and turns the generator off. He's the guy that is quietly, without really trying, he becomes the like go-to secondhand man. And I just respect the hell out of that, especially like once we get into this scene of them all like gathering together and trying to figure things out. David looks at him and can see the absolute hopelessness in his eyes. And yet he's still like keeping his cool for the
and
good of
participating,
everyone.
still
Yes.
planning, still willing to be part of things. Not like the hopelessness where you just be like, I don't give a shit. We're all gonna die. Who cares?
Yeah.
You walk away.
He's
strong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's my favorite character.
The fucking best. Mrs. Carmody starts another one of her rants talking about blood sacrifice. Then a random hero smacks her across the face.
Can we point out though that when she talks about that, David, and she pulls her hand away from her slapped face and there's blood and she's like, see? But David says that he how does he put it? He's thinking about it from a future time frame and thinking,
if I had known then
well,
what
no,
I
he's
know
trying.
now.
He
right?
hopes that she didn't mean what eventually he knows she did actually mean.
Yeah, he's
It's just creepy. It's another bit. I mean, we know because we've read it, but it's another bit of foreshadowing that if you catch that, you're like, what the fuck? He thought, he was hoping she meant like, oh, a dog, because there are dogs in the store. People brought their pets in.
Yeah.
It's also, we don't really, the way the story's being told, because we get the things like, I never saw her again. We never saw, like, it's funny because like, we've read the story. We know what the reveal of the framework is. I don't want to talk about it yet, but it's very interesting.
It is, because it's that kind of foreshadowing I'm talking about the whole episode. It's almost, it almost goes by unnoticed. It's really cool.
So in order to do something, because at this point people just need something to do, they start stacking fertilizer and dog food bags by the plate glass windows because it's going to be nightfall.
They don't know how big
hours.
those tentacles are, but that's fine. Got to do
Right.
something.
No kidding.
And they make like little narrow windows so they can keep watch, which is also cool.
It's so great.
The aura of hopelessness over this story is it's weirdly nihilistic. Like the idea of David lets them put these bags up without saying anything, but we know, and he knows, that this is all
For nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
there's he saw one of the tentacles in the back room that was severed at the time, right? Squeeze a bag of dog food so hard it exploded.
Yup.
Mhm.
And they're like, it doesn't matter. These are 25 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever. It does not matter. If they decide to come in here, they're coming in here. And that level of like, what's the... 'cause there's a point where Billy asks, will this be over? Not when will this be over? Will this be over?
Yep.
Is so deeply upsetting.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Again, the foreshadowing, like
Yeah.
all these small, minor moments that I think get into your brain and make you feel the hopelessness.
Well, it's also the burden of knowledge. The people who are putting that plan in action don't know what we know about what's out there.
I also think it just... I personally have never been in, knock on all the wood there is, a real disaster situation like this. But I can imagine the shock and the fear and all of that making it feel like, you know, when things are going bad, this is just how life is now. And that's so goddamn scary. That's just a fucking real human fear.
When they start talking about how people are kind of splitting off into groups and making themselves comfortable, making yourself comfortable in a location that one is not meant to make themselves comfortable in sends that message of hopelessness.
Yeah,
like
a place
you're settling
where
in for
you're visiting for like an hour because you
Yeah.
need stuff, and then
it's
now this is your home.
yes. Before they start handling all of these assignments, though, Dan Miller, who just shows up in the story now, who is
the
an
other
out-of-towner.
really great character.
Yeah.
Because David's just like, fuck, this guy's awesome.
Yeah.
We
And
should
he-
be following him.
And he's the kind of guy who you can't help but like right away, and then you can't help not liking later when you realize he's better at everything
Yeah.
than
I
you.
love that description of him
It tells
so
you
much.
everything you need to know
Yup.
about this guy.
And especially because he gathers everyone together and like kind of becomes the default leader, which I think is hilarious
And I
because
thi-
he's just some guy.
I think it makes perfect sense though, because the only people who have the knowledge to appropriately take leadership are either those two are drunk and no one should follow them. And we've talked so much already about how Ollie and David are already so exhausted. And so it's very cool that this guy, from this guy's perspective, stepping up and taking charge.
And I did think it was hilarious because he like becomes this leader and you think, oh, he's just gonna be just some guy. It's not what makes him so great. But then he comes over and he like noticed the look
yes.
on Ollie and David's face that they exchanged that said like,
when people are like, "Oh, throw salt on him, light
Yeah,
a match, and burn him."
fight him off with brooms.
Yeah.
They looked at each other like, what the fuck is that going to do? They don't understand how little difference how that will make. And this guy that we just are introduced to in the crowd sees it and is like, that bad, huh? And it's like, oh, this guy's competent
This
as
guy fucking
fuck.
gets
He's
it.
observant and he's a problem solver because then he comes up with the idea of, hey, we can make torches
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
with mops.
It's
and-
like immediately, I was like, why are
kerosene, yeah.
we following this guy? This
Yeah.
guy's great.
Nothing like a bunch of torches indoors.
Yeah. You gotta do what you gotta do, man.
But yeah, he basically says cards on the table. Who has what? Like who has medicine? Who has weapons? And like the old guy's like, got a shotgun in my truck. I'm probably not gonna go get it. Though.
Well, no, he's
Oh,
like,
or
I
he
can.
says,
he
I'll go
offers.
get it if you want it.
Yeah. No.
And they're like, don't
that.
do that. And he's like, well, I just thought I should offer.
We meet Amanda Dumfries, who has a pistol in her purse because
Hot.
because I love that David's like, God, your husband's stupid for traveling away from a 10.
The moment
Oh my God. It's great.
That is
It's great.
But I do love the moment when the gun is introduced because
Yeah.
I don't care what you're reading. I don't care what situation is happening. The second a gun is introduced, things have just gotten worse.
The only thing that made me feel just even slightly okay about it is that Ali is the one who ended up with it.
Yeah,
Because the moment
but-
it came out as like,
you know-
Again, another
You
surprising
know.
moment.
You know that gun is, Ollie's
Someone's
not going to
getting-
use that.
I know.
Someone's getting that gun used on him,
Yeah.
though. But I love that Ollie's like, yeah, I have 2 guns similar. I also target shoot. And they're like,
Yeah, badass.
fuck, all right, Ollie.
I know Bud is like, you. Oh, I hate that guy.
Yeah. At 4:30, they are sitting at the window together, Billy and David, because it's David's watch. And a very real moment that David finds it's impossible to say anything to his son right now because what is there to say or do right now? And Billy has this horrible breakdown and like he says, I just want to apologize to my mom for all the times I was bad and stuff.
Heartbreaking.
And it's just awful.
And the fact that it's progressed to the point where David can't even tell comforting lies anymore.
Because he
is
can't
just
open
saying,
his mouth. He'll just
I
cry.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. He asks, is mom okay? And he just says, I don't know.
And he describes the sobbing as the cries only a mother can fix.
Yes,
and so he
God,
feels
that
so
hurts.
powerless to just sit there with his crying child. I just, God, the hopelessness and powerlessness that are all over this story make it so fucking human.
Luckily,
and I love it.
Billy's old babysitter's there, and she takes him away for a while, so
Yes.
that the next thing can happen, which, ooh,
Norton and the remaining 4 flat earthers, well, 5 flat earthers, so
then 4, very
then
shortly.
4, decide they're leaving. They've had it. They're done. And I love that David says it's something to the effect of, at this point, I can't tell whether he believes his own bullshit or not.
Yeah.
That's how far gone he is down this road. And David asks the most insulting thing he can ask of another man, tie this around your waist.
Again,
apparently.
a totally reasonable
Fully.
thing. Yeah, he has a clothesline. He's like, just tie it around your waist. When you get out there, when you get like, it's 300 feet,
Yep.
tie that to something else. Just so we know. And
Yeah,
Norton's
and
like,
when Norton's like, why? And he's like, so I know you made it 300 feet.
yeah,
That's terrifying.
That's
that
horrifying.
is. It's so horrifying that they lose a member and it's only 4.
I love
Yeah, the
Yeah.
one guy just walks away. He's like, never mind.
He's like, shit, yeah, that's brutal.
so good.
But another guy steps up, though. I think this is a really cool exchange, too. He's like, I'll do it. And Norton kind of starts to give him shit. And this guy is kind of Ollie calm. He's just like, I'm going to do it.
Right.
Is there a problem with that? And so he does it.
And I love because he's like, I'll do it, but if it starts holding me back, I've got a knife. I'll cut this thing right off. Like pretty much saying don't fuck around with this.
Which makes sense because, like, if these people really through madness or through actual, I don't know, skepticism, truly believe, because they just leave and they're like, we'll send people back for you.
Yeah, they do say that.
So,
several times.
like, we know that it's an insane thing to do, but from their perspective, they're being completely reasonable. Norm, not so much, or whatever. Norton, not so much. But this guy just seems like a very reasonable guy.
If it'll
who's
make
finally
you feel
tired.
better, I can do that. It costs me nothing to tie this around my waist.
Who would like to talk about what happens once that clothesline has been parsed 2/3 all the way out?
Ooh,
In a very tense letting out of 2/3 of 300 feet of rope.
it ends the way you just really wanted to. It's so satisfying, like in a really horrible way. So David has the clothesline and they leave. It's 4 of them. Norton, the guy who agreed to go, someone else who apparently doesn't matter because I can't remember, and then
An older woman.
an elderly woman.
Yeah.
And we just get this scene of him feeding the clothesline out and everything's going fine. I love the description. He watches them. And we got a cool description of the fog sort of overtaking the parking lot that we skipped past. But he watches them and just the quality of the mist as they move into that wall, the lighter parts of them disappear. And then it's like there's just clothes walking until those disappear.
So awesome.
There's also a bit of a small plot hole, not to be that asshole.
Oh, no.
Because as they walk out into the mist, Dave says that Norton turns and says something to him, but he can't hear it.
Yeah, I saw
Which is really cool because he says it sounds muffled like a radio that's in another room. Which is very cool.
Like the mist
to
is
think
so
that
dense,
The mist
it's-
is so dense, or in some other way, blocking the sound. Extremely cool. Except we've been hearing people scream outside the whole book.
Yeah.
So,
And we're going to hear people screaming again.
very soon,
Maybe it's just the high-pitched noises that get through
I
them.
guess.
Because all of a sudden, the clothesline starts jerking all over the place. And then it just like gets pulled through David's hand by several feet
Just
all at
20
once.
feet.
Burns, gives him a little
Oh.
bit of a burn, and then does it again. And it's jerking even more violently. And they're hearing these screams, and they hear the elderly woman screaming. And some of the screams sound inhuman, like human lungs could not make that noise. And then that all stops. And everybody wants David to shut the door. And he's like, hold on a second. And he starts pulling the clothesline back through the door. And eventually, what he's pulling back is red with blood
The
and
last
bits of
3 feet.
cotton.
Ugh.
And the end of the line is completely chewed up.
Yep.
And Mrs. Carmody stands there and calls that death is outside. And no one contradicts her as they close the door.
Ooh, she's getting powerful, guys.
And that's where we leave off for this episode.
And that is it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. Join us next time where we will be finishing The Mist for Joshua Kahn and Benjamin Graham. I'm CM Alexander reminding you, the horrors of the Inquisition are nothing compared to the fates your mind can imagine for your loved ones. Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you for listening to The Mist, Part 1. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Derry Public Radio and Twitter at Derry Public. You can also send us an email at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. Check out our Etsy store for merchandise and our Patreon for bonus episodes. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.